Gambit Chads, we are back as I am on the precipice of my I am norm. I have 6 out of 7 after a very good day of chess, and I need to finish with a minimum of 7 out of 9. So we are close. We needed at least 1 point from our last two games, but is by no means a guarantee. I am playing some very strong kids in the last two rounds that are rising 2177, Vasigaran and Nandakumar, and my last round game, which I hope to get to also in this video actually, against Ethan Song of Canada. So without further ado, let's get right into this game. The first one is with white. And then the next one I will have to play black. So I actually really wanted to clinch it with this game right here. So this is a 90 plus 30 time control. 90 minutes plus 30 seconds for every move you make. Just make sure. Okay, we're good. Here we go. So knight c3, I'm playing a closed Sicilian this time. I had played an open Sicilian and gotten a dragon in one of my other games, and in another I had played an Alapin. Here, I continue to switch it up, trying to stay unpredictable. I play knight c3, my opponent plays g6. So a lot of these lines are actually quite similar between like knight c6, d6, and g6. Only like e6 and a6, the other kind of main moves in this position, have their own distinct flavor, with a6 trying to play b5 very quickly, e6 trying to play d5 and set up like that. Knight c6 is also very like often they want to do this as well. It does invite this line with bishop to b5, trying to trade immediately, and often black here should play knight d4, and there's some other theory there. D6, the drawback of this move could be, while there's no real bishop b5 bothering this knight so quick, the drawback of this move is that often you're not able to maybe play d5 in one go. Whereas g6 is also very playable. There's still no bishop to b5 to bother you. You can still maybe play d5 in one go. The downside of g6 is it invites this move d4. And the main line here after d4 is with pawn takes, queen takes, hitting the rook. Knight to f6, we take advantage of that moment of weakness before this diagonal is filled. So black here is doing all right. They have knight c6 coming, so e5 is not really playable here. And there's some theory here that goes on with the queen should shift to a4, where she can not really get hit again and try to do some damage this way. So e5 still wants to be played, so black's best try is typically with d6. e5 anyway is how the theory goes, takes. And here black could play like the main line, bishop d7, queen d4, also a move. One of the lines that I think is quite dangerous, though, is this bishop to g7 idea, after which black often just gives this pawn, something like this. So white's able to get that pawn, but black castled very quickly, and often what black can do is trying to use these c lines, and so the engine gives white a slight pull here, but the bishops can operate quite well, and black here I think has some pretty solid compensation for the pawn. But anyway, there's a lot of theory there that I was actually preparing for this game, but my opponent surprised me with this move, bishop to g7. So bishop to g7, and actually now if I open the Lichess database, this will be called Modern Defense, Modern Pterodactyl. So pterodactyl is in the flying dinosaur that starts with PT. And with bishop to g7, so it comes from a modern typically, because it's like modern being this move, g6 on the first move, and here playing c5, right? Instead of like d6 or just something little like that. So that's what we've transposed to in this game. And the best way to take advantage of this is to actually play this move, pawn takes c5. And so here black has two main moves, one of which is queen to a5. So targeting this knight twice now, and also trying to grab this pawn. White, I knew how to grab an advantage here, though. It's with bishop to d2, queen takes c5, and now knight to d5. And this knight is now actually really looking at this c7 square. For example, if pawn to e6, chasing this knight out, we play this move bishop to b4. Queen needs to stay on knight c7, which would deliver a fork here. And if queen c6, you can pause the video, white to play and win. Very nice move, bishop to b5. Queen is out of squares other than actually capturing this bishop, where we're not taking the rook here, we're taking the queen. So some very dangerous lines. Bishop takes b2 does not end any better for black. They can go bishop to g7 and suffer the same fate with this and this. They can go bishop to d4 and actually still lose, because this still loses for them. There's no queen e3 thanks to this knight, and they're dropping a combination of this bishop and knight to c7 or in some form. So I actually just have no more pieces here, and white's just completely winning. So anyway, my opponent did not play queen to a5, in the game. It's so in that position, the best move for black is like this ugly knight a6 just to cover c7. So my opponent did not do that though and played bishop takes c3, which is the other move. So bishop takes c3 really messes up my pawns. Obviously now I have these tripled isolated pawns. However, that was a pretty important dark square bishop. In fact, it was their only developed piece. So queen a5. Black plays trying to grab these pawns, and I didn't really know this, but I remembered one time, I think someone had mentioned this position to me because it's like common in Ultra Bullet among like modern players who like to do this. Someone had mentioned to me this idea for white. I mean, white has like a number of options here, including like maybe two, maybe, so that queen takes c5, bishop e3. I mean, any way you slice it, your pawns are going to be bad, and you might like I don't know, you're behind in development a little bit. Knight e2. I mean, they can also look at taking this pawn later, playing knight f6, castling now. The knight could grab that pawn. So there's a lot of options that both sides have here. But I played, I think, a very good one that I knew of, which was queen d4, which defends the pawns, more importantly targets the rook, so there's no knight c6 here. And after knight to f6, before knight c6 comes in, which would be a very good bothersome move for the queen that's tenuously defending this, is just shift queen b4. So proposing this queen trade, which if accepted, black would find themselves at a disadvantage, because now we fixed our pawns, even though black has gone one back. Bishop to b2 would target the rook, castles and like just bishop to d3 here. And white has an excellent bishop pair, space advantage, everything's beautiful for them, rooks come to the center, etc. So this would be a very, very pleasant endgame. My opponent correctly declines with queen to c7. It should be noted here that like modern defense, modern pterodactyl, I'm going to tell you what this is called. Pterodactyl defense, Eastern, you guys aren't even going to believe me. Eastern Pteranodon. Is that like a subspecies of this dinosaur? I don't even know. I'd believe it. So with queen to c7, however, you can see with the eval bar here, I mean, and probably by the fact that it's called pterodactyl or something weird like that, that white should have an advantage here. And indeed, white is up a pawn and has the bishop pair, but it's tricky to play because it's not really clear where your pieces go, and your queenside pawn structure really stinks. Really, really stinks. Knight c6 is another option, but I think after just trade and f3, white's doing fine. But queen c7, so it's a tricky move. It's a tricky move. And knight c6 is coming. My queen is tenuously defending like a couple pawns here. And so what I played in this position was f3. So, just solidifying this. The engine's top recommendation is bishop to d3. Holding here. I didn't play bishop to d3 because knight a6, which hits c5 twice, and it obviously my queen as well. I would have to take it and move my bishop for the second time, after which the engine recommends here f3, actually, to fortify this against like a5 when your queen gets hit and your queen is defending a number of pawns. So I didn't want to have to move my bishop twice, but here apparently this is still fine, and pawn takes a6 nixes really black's primary idea in this position, which should be this move b6. b6, and if they can attain this pawn trade, that's actually what they're looking to do. It might be like, why are you trading off for this pawn? But and they're actually okay losing that pawn. What they want to do more than anything is put the rooks here and here, after which their pieces just attain a ton of freedom, and they can target this. They also want to play this move pawn to d5, which really frees them. So I think this is demonstrated pretty well in a couple lines here. So my opponent played this move knight c6, queen a3, and I think here queen a3 is a good choice for the queen, actually. I'll note, because she's out of the way of most things, and it pins kind of against a takes b6 with the hit on the row. If my opponent here plays b6, is probably what they should play in this position, because they might not get another chance. They might not get another chance. So b6 takes, and even if you have to play this with like queen takes b6, which is maybe even if it's not their first choice, is probably best. But for example, like in this other line here, so takes, bishop to e3, black here can play, I think, this very good move. Yeah, it's this move here, knight to a6, just to demonstrate a little bit more there. Targeting the queen, queen takes b6 would lose your rook. So this theory would go takes, bishop takes b6, and just queen c6. Yes, this is the position I wanted to show. This is actually some just following some engine lines where white has actually done everything correct, and grabbed another pawn here. However, d5 is coming. Knight takes d5 would target a number of things. This bishop cuts my castle at the moment, and these rooks can swing into the game. So even though white's up 2 pawns and the engine says plus 0.8, this is a pretty dangerous position, actually. And so probably how black should have proceeded here. I mean, like, in for a penny, in for a pound. You know, you've already sacrificed this one pawn. What's another? You know, you got to get your pieces out. So knight c6, I play queen to a3. Black castles, which I think is that one's got to be a mistake, because here I think b6 is quite a necessary choice. Castles, knight to e2, I played. So knight to e2 is not quite the engine's recommendation, but it's still a pretty good move, because it does block the bishop, but something I definitely want to do is this move bishop to f4, targeting the queen. The engine's recommendation is this move bishop to e3, and I didn't play bishop to e3 because I wanted to also fight against the d-pawn push. So bishop to e3 fights very well against b6, takes, and with the pin here, the bishop controls this against the queen, so neither the queen nor the pawn can take. However, there's this line with d5. En passant needs to be played, takes, and d5 is now trying to be played again, which would open things up here in a pretty dangerous way. However, white has actually a very good move here, fighting against d5, and it would be this move castles long, just voluntarily castling into this, targeting this d6 pawn, and indeed fighting against d5. And this is the way, apparently, for white to maintain their edge in the best way possible. I played this move, bishop to e3. Apparently, what black should play, just I thought this was cute, was b6, and if takes, actually just queen b7. And now threatening takes, because this rook is protected onto the queen. So then if takes here, then d5. So black's now down a few pawns, but this is just an insane position to play for white, because your king is just totally in no man's land, just cannot get out anywhere. And I don't know, there's strikes all over the place. Knight takes a7 will be played, and the rooks will be unleashed, and this seems a little dangerous. I mean, you have this to deal with in the center right now. You don't really want to take it. Knight takes, it targets your one developed piece. So I don't know, just kind of a crazy situation right here. This did not happen. I played knight to e2 so that I have bishop to f4, which is a good move against either break that it comes in. So b6 came and bishop to f4. So I'm happy about this. I'm at least able to develop. With this knight e2, I recognize I will have to move it again to develop this bishop, but I was actually open to the idea of long castles, depending on what exactly would happen with the files. e5 here could be played, but I think just like bishop to g5, tempo on the knight, and honestly, I think white has gotten a number of solid achievements out of the opening here. Queen to b7 was played. Here I played this move, rook to b1. So queen to b7, so my opponent was okay playing that because they wanted to play takes b6 here. I think the main achievement I got was this development with pure tempo. Like I never moved that bishop before, and I still got my knight in the game. So takes b6 is not something I wanted to do, because if a takes b6, now black gets what they want. They target my queen, and they're going to be able to play d5 and swing this rook into the game. And here they're cooking with gas when they're able to make this trade, right? So queen to b7. The engine's recommendation is this move knight to d4. This is very difficult to play. I think takes, queen to b2, hitting the rook, and rook needs to swing to d1. Just anything really to stop a takes b6. And apparently I was supposed to play like this, but I can't really fault myself. I mean, this invasion looks a little scary, and unclear exactly what's going on. But, you know, maybe black picks up this pawn or something, but the bishop develops and the king castles, and so white gets their pieces out, and activity is really the name of the game. So I play this move, though, rook to b1, which is fine, and it was my plan when I had played knight to e2. In case of b6, I thought that I could really stop that queen, because I would play bishop to f4 and rook to b1, and with these moves in conjunction, there is no pawn trade happening here. And as long as I keep my pawn here, I keep d5 at bay, and I really keep black's whole position at bay. So really, there's nowhere left for this queen to go except propose this queen trade with queen to a6, which I really have to accept. Takes, and bishop takes a6. So the queen gets out of the way, but this is still not clear at all. So at this moment, I'm still up one pawn. I have all 8 of my pawns. My pawn has 7, and I could take twice on b6. But it's a little scary of a proposition, because black has been wanting to make this exchange for a minute. If I take everything, there's this move, just rook f to c8, preparing d5, now that the knight has another protector. And just not clear what to do here. For example, if something like knight to c1 because maybe you don't want to lose a2 or something. Then I think after just takes f1, and let's say maybe knight a5 here. Let's see, yeah, d5, takes d5. Not clear what you're doing with this, because any trade here seems ugly. Like a lot of these, it's just an ugly situation. All these rooks, all these things attack. Oh yes, also you've gone and forked, so not good. So yes, and if e5, knight h5 hits the bishop, and this pawn is also a big problem. So knight to c1 was not a move that you could really play here. Very tough to keep an advantage. Something like, I was thinking during the game of something like king to f2, d5, that I would play in this position, and something like knight d4. Um, but not clear, because so I'm basically trying to make several trades around here. So say if bishop takes f1, I would play knight takes c6, hitting the bishop and hitting this pawn. I was thinking about some various ideas like this, and then maybe if knight takes d4, I would take this, and maybe they take this, but maybe I can defend this somehow. I'm not sure. Yeah, so this seems pretty accurate analysis. Rook takes a6 a bit better to make that trade. Takes, rook c3, rook d1. So it's just some craziness happening. It's hard. Like all these pawns are hanging, but ideally the bishops should be better than the knights. But like I don't have any of my pieces out, and it's hard to recommend many other things other than doing that, because initially my plan was this move knight to d4, and if bishop takes f1, I was going to play knight takes c6, threatening knight takes e7 check if they move the bishop. So then if takes, I would recapture here, which would also kind of develop my pieces by making this trade. And then maybe knight to d7 is kind of going to be the issue here. Because again, I'm happy, like I could be very happy about this, right? Then there's no a takes b6, there's no nasty files getting opened here. But black can always kind of keep this pressure on me by playing like this move knight d7, forcing my hand to this exchange, and they get this a file. And honestly, they're in business here with b5, and the knight can jump in. So I mean, it's kind of a tough situation. Like I have a number of options. I have also this move rook takes f1, hoping for maybe something like knight takes d4, takes, and then d5. I would love this. I don't need every pawn. I just need kind of just a solid position. I love that my bishop controls the b8 square, and I would take this invasion. I think but black here could probably play rook c8 and keep the dream going of just having those files open. It's kind of tough stuff to play around. It's kind of tough stuff to play around. Maybe just like some king e2 here, pawn takes c5, maybe trade, something like that. So, but honestly, black's position is looking rather ferocious. If they really and in the game I went for this. So I played takes and rook takes b6, which I believe is the engine's recommendation, but it requires a lot of precision on white's part. And while I'm up 2 pawns at this exact moment, it shouldn't stay that way. However, my opponent, fortunately, did not play this move rook fc8, which I think keeps a lot of the pressure on me, threatening this d5 idea. They went for the pawn, takes, and takes, which relieves so much pressure. I am so happy to make this trade. Bishop takes e2, freeing these pieces, and they take just the 1 pawn. You can have it. I play king d2, protecting c2. My rook is free. I was very, very happy for that trade. So I think that's really was an error on their part, taking on e2 for just the 1 pawn. And now I feel free. I feel very, very free. All my pieces are okay. There's no imminent d5 because that knight is targeted. So really, like that was the force of their position. I felt was gone, and I'm up 1 pawn, but it like obviously it doesn't look like a very good pawn because it's doubled, and it doesn't look like how are you ever going to make a pass pawn. But I do have the bishop pair here, and so something like maybe I'll try to play. So okay, in the game was rook to c8, and I play rook to b1. And my opponent actually made a blunder here. But let's say they played something like king to g7. I would probably play something here like rook a6, trading off for that guy. Takes, targeting the rook, rook d8, c4. c4 is a very important move. As soon as d5 becomes on the table, I trade off that rook. It was targeting the knight. d5 now taken off the table. It would maybe be rather dangerous. Knight takes d5, hitting the bishop with the rook onto my king. But here I felt like I'm with the bishops, with everything, I could control the position, maybe march my king down, bring my rook into the game, and just put pressure at various points, and I felt like the bishops could be good, and I would just continuously play for a win with absolutely zero risk. That's what I was kind of looking for, actually, was to play for a win in an endgame with zero risk, only needing 1 out of 2 to clinch the norm. A draw wouldn't be the end of the world. So d5 was played here, however, and you can see the question mark. So d5, my opponent was excited to do it. They played rook c8, I played rook b1, and they got in d5 as soon as it looked like they could with this protected. However, I have a very nice move here. It's this move bishop to a6. And it looks like it refutes d5 right away, because the rook is hit, and so is that knight. And this square is gone. So where are you going to go? You got to go rook a8, but I just played... So now if I take this, you can take this, and so, okay, you're still alive. But I play this move bishop to b7. But, a lot of buts, they can play this move knight to a5. So things are not so clear. They're threatening knight c4. If I dodge against knight c4, which is a fork here and here, if I dodge against knight c4, then they can save the rook. If I take the rook, which I did, knight to c4 check, and they can take here, right? Now if I take their knight, they take my bishop. So I have one very important move here to maintain this big advantage. It is the move bishop to c6. Bishop to c6 is very, very precise. Now black is in a very, very tough spot. The knight is attacked, and they have another hidden issue almost. If they move the knight to an obvious square, well, for one, I could take this pawn. But for two, I play this move bishop to h6. And all of a sudden, how do you stop checkmate? How do you stop checkmate? Like out of nowhere almost, right? With that taken away from the rook, obviously you cannot block my rook. If my rook were somewhere else, then rook a1 could checkmate me with this pattern on the king. But how do you stop checkmate? So king to h8 looks like it might work, stuffing the knight back there, but I can play in this position like bishop takes d5, pinning that way. Knight can't leave. It was doing something kind of important. So say rook a4, and here's something like bishop takes f7. Just taking a lot of things. Knight g8. It's a tough resource to keep in hand. You actually still can't play rook a8 because this is hit. So black might just be dead lost here, if not losing at minimum just a few pawns. And so, for example, if something like knight bd7, there's ideas like e5 hitting the knight. If knight to h5 hitting my bishop, bishop to h6, knight is hit, rook b8 on the table. And so, this can win a number of ways. So my bishops are just doing such great jobs, like controlling a8, controlling all these important squares here. Knight d7, I think still bishop to h6 can be played with the idea of like takes and like rook b7 hitting the knight and trying to play rook to b8. If nothing else, you can also just grab this pawn and just be up a few pawns. So my opponent did not want to play anymore, actually, and after bishop to c6, thought for a long time and actually just resigned. They actually just resigned. Oh, rook a6 was the other move, but I have here just bishop b7 winning that. So, yeah, with that, all of a sudden I had clinched my norm with 7 out of 8. I was very, very happy. Let me talk more about it after I show you round 9. So round 9 was the next day, and I was not feeling my best. I had already clinched the norm regardless of the result, actually, with a round to spare. So here we can have this. Let's switch that up a little bit. Round 9. There we go. I just wanted a nicer text box, Okay, here we go. So I was facing the Sicilian. I'll talk more about the norm and everything after this game, but let's get through this one. So I was playing a Sicilian here, and instead of playing my normal knight c6 stuff, I had imagined I would be getting prepped against a Rossalimo. I'd seen my opponent play that, so instead I played g6 to avoid that. And we actually talked about this in the other video, just also kind of why I wanted to combine them. White here has the option of queen takes d4 when you play against quick g6s. I mean, yes, bishop b5s are taken away as an option when there's no knight c6 that early. And this transposes. This transposes to exactly what we saw with knight c3, because knight c3 is with knight c3 on the with knight c3 on the second move. because here knight c3 is the best move anyway, and you saw in the other position knight f3 was the best move, whether this got played on move 2 by white or this got played on move 2 by white, it would really transpose anyway. And so here I was imagining to play it with black, and I was planning on playing this pawn sacrifice actually with takes, bishop to g7, and either bishop to b5 or knight takes c6. Both are quite similar. And like this pawn sacrifice, I was planning on playing bishop d7, rook b8. Both are moves here. So this was the idea. This was my expectation. And if not, then I would just play normal open Sicilian stuff. And that's what happened. So my opponent actually just plays knight takes d4. Another option white has is this move c3, transposing into kind of an Alpin structure where black has played this move, which is a little bit of a strange move to play against an Alpin. Anyway, in the game, my opponent plays this move d4. I take it, knight takes, and I play knight c6 here to sort of transpose back to my modern Maroczy, but my opponent's blitzing this out, so it seems that they had actually prepared for knight c6 and gotten the transposition into that anyway. So a little disappointing for me, because so I play this knight f6, d6, and so let's talk about the Maroczy and actually why I've delayed this move, bishop to g7. So something I want to do is play knight takes d4, and after queen takes d4, target the queen. I want to draw the queen out and force her to move for an additional time. So with this move d6, it's actually fighting against bishop to e3 because I have this knight to g4 idea. And basically here, I mean, white's main moves are f3 and bishop to e2. Knight c2 is also an option. But in this position, my opponent plays bishop to e2, which is the main line. And so typically I play this move knight takes d4 because this is my last chance to do it. If I play bishop to g7, then bishop to e3, and this will be able to recapture. So I want to drag their queen out, queen takes d4, because with the bishop on e2 prevents against knight g4. So bishop to e2 threatens bishop to e3, which protects the knight like that. This is an option I could have played. Knight takes d4. Bishop to g7, and the point is here, now castles, now I defend the bishop, so now the knight is free to go. Before it would have just hung the bishop, right? In this position, I cannot move it. So castles and queen to d2. And then I knew some theory here, but I had also played some games in the database here. So I had assuming my opponent had prepared for me. You see with the high times we have on the clock, I thought for a minute and just played something I didn't know as well, but I kind of thought maybe they didn't know anything either. So I just played this line with bishop to g7, allowing bishop to e3. So this is kind of like the main line Maroczy bind stuff. So the Maroczy bind, for those of you who don't know, is with the pawn on c4 instead of c2. It's very, very like positional and slower. White tries to put an iron clamp on the center, preventing like this d5 break and preventing, b5 and everything, kind of just preventing all of black's breaks. And often what they'll try to do is like queen d2 and bring their rooks to the middle, knight d5. Maybe e takes d5 is a possibility for their rook to put pressure on this pawn. C takes also could be a possibility. There's some more ambitious lines where they try and play like f4 and bring the rooks here and try and play maybe f5 or e5. Those are not all that common, but they can happen. And in this game, I just play bishop c7. My opponent plays f3. So I set up, though, how I knew, which it was trading here anyway, and playing this move a5. So basically, my bishop wants to sit on c6, and because this can be a good setup, so for example, like the main move here is just b3 or something, bishop to c6, queen d2, this can be a very good setup against knight to d5. Because knights on d5 can be very, very annoying in the Maroczy. You have a couple, you're left with a few bad options. One is taking it. Either c takes or e takes, both of these help white's position. Like this, gives them the c file and like the bishop there. Or e takes, often they'll put now a lot of pressure on this e7 point. The other option is leave it, where the knight, is now just going to sit here and just like, be an absolute octopus, just damaging from all sides of the board. The other option is try to play e6 without losing this pawn. Try to play e6, chase it away. And often the bishop on c6, that's why we put it there instead of on e6, where it was doing nothing, staring into this pawn chain. Here, okay, you can argue it's still doing nothing, but my opponent played f3, and so f4 is a common idea, f4, and so the bishop sits better here, like having an actual target if this pawn were to try to go elsewhere. So bishop c6, it's a good spot for this bishop, and it frees this pawn to maybe play e6 if need be. And it keeps black's activity such that white, then would have to organize attacks on this pawn, but then, maybe we can play queen here and like try to play d5 or something like this. So the bishop on c6 should be in the right spot because it frees this pawn to go to e6 and gives black the necessary activity to not just lose this pawn in the case of e6 to chase the knight away. So I bring my bishop to c6, and a5 is a necessary part of that. If I just play bishop c6 right now, white has this good move b4, which then they'll just take a lot of space here and play b5 whenever they feel like it. Maybe not immediately, but when they feel like it. So it's important here to first play this move a5. My opponent here, so I'll open the database here. I didn't know too much theory here, but there's 175 games in the database, and here you can see 175. And after my opponent plays this next move, there's 0. It's rook to b1 of all moves. Not b. So b3 I think is the most logical because you can counter a4 with b4, rather than here a4 you're on the wrong side of en passant here. Rook to b1, not super clear what you're doing, but you're getting out of the way of this, and white is not, pressed for time such that they have to do something right now. Queen d2 is kind of more in line with what I was expecting. And this move, I mean, it's not like a blunder by any means. It's just not like especially super useful or where the rook typically goes, and kind of threw me off a little bit in this game. So after rook to b1, I play this move bishop to c6, and my opponent continues blitzing out slow moves. King to h1. Just getting out of the way of this diagonal, just in case. I play knight to d7, continuing with what I knew were common Maroczy plans, trying to swap these dark square bishops. The knight here now can sit very well on c5. It's a good thing there's no b4, right? So the knight sits very well on c5, and then maybe at some moment, so like here, let's say knight d5, let's say I play knight c5, let's say they play queen d2, I go here. Like something that I might dream of doing someday is maybe taking this, playing knight d4. This was my dream. And then I'd be facing a light square bishop with a beautiful dark square outpost knight. I don't know. A boy can dream. So, but I mean, regardless here, I'd probably maybe start with e6 or something. But I feel like I got put my pieces on solid squares. Maybe some point, like we can play for f5. We can have a variety of ideas here. And I feel like they're stuck with a pretty poor light square bishop. And they'd want to play f4 here to maybe get something going here, get some attack, but that's exactly why we put these pieces here to keep an eye on that e4 pawn. So here my opponent plays bishop e3, which I knew is a common idea in Maroczys, but they should have like queen d2 and rook c1 or rook d1 in, some more useful moves than like here and here. So like this queen should already be on d2, or this rook should be on c1. And so I wanted to take advantage that they dodged this dark square bishop trade, and I wanted to take advantage, and I eventually went for a very interesting decision. I took on c3, which is the engine's recommendation. It certainly has. Obviously, I would never have done this if they could play rook takes or queen takes c3, right? I did this. It has a very clear downside, which is that I'm giving up my dark square bishop, and now they have an uncontested dark square bishop around my king. Right? What I'm banking on is that I can limit f4 due to my pressure on the e4 pawn. So I like f4, f5. That would kind of be how they'd attack me, if at all. And so here, I start with this move f6 because I'm wary of, queen d4, bishop h6, sneaking in here. I need to fortify the dark squares around my king. I don't want e5 coming. So f6 is a good step to fortifying dark squares. I want to put now all the pawns on dark squares. And what I've gained, though, is pawn takes c3, very stupid move, messed up their queenside structure. So it's, very, like, there's reasons why I want to show these games together. This is another parallel of, like, a Sicilian where we went for bishop takes c3, pawn takes c3 happened. So absence of the dark square bishop, but we've messed up these pawns, and now c4 can be a target, and knight c5 should be a really nice outpost for me. So to this point, I think I've played quite well. My opponent plays queen to e1, shifting, that direction. I played this move pawn to a4. a4, so could be a quite useful move. Queen or rook can go there, and would patrol a lot of useful things down this fifth rank. Stop at c5, just keeping an eye on, think the old king side there, rook to a5, your rook can shift there to force the queen out of h4. That's an interesting idea. Maybe just queen to a5, then would pressure c3, ask some questions about, how are you protecting these c-pawns? Well, hopefully keeping everything in check. So at this point, I'm feeling pretty good about my position. I feel like I kind of hold all the cards, and white is maybe out of ideas. Like what are you really gonna do to me with this queen over here, this bishop over here? Like you never actually make an actual pawn break. Whereas I'm gonna be attacking things, and I kind of control everything. There's never not gonna be e5. There's not gonna be c5. What are you gonna do to me? Well, I was wrong. There was c5, and it was a good decision. c5, it really only gives me one choice. I don't want, like lots of these trades here. That would be very, very bad. Then they've opened the position for what was a terrible light square bishop. They've also traded off for what was a terrible pawn and like given something like this. So that's obviously a big no-no. So c5, I have to take it. I figured they were doing this for bishops to c4 check, and it was only in this position that I realized um, here, this was very, very bad. I still blitzed out king to h8 here, is the truth. I still didn't see it, and then they play bishop to h6, and I'm like, oh my goodness. I missed that my rook is out of squares. My rook is out of squares. I probably should have like played a queen move earlier, or just played knight c5 earlier, and stopped this whole idea. That might have been a more practical choice here, actually. I'll turn on the engine. What is there? Yeah, it does recommend near knight c5. Just blockading c5. And yeah, I mean, obviously they don't want to make this trade. That's a very important dark square bishop to them. They can attack this. I can protect it. b6 is not something I super wanted to play, though, because I like how easy it is to protect the pawn on b7 from this rook. But knight on c5 stops this pawn and keeps that light square bishop bad probably forever, if it's going to be boxed in by these guys and no f4 will ever happen. So that was probably a missed opportunity, and they took their opportunity. Credit to my opponent taking this opportunity, striking with c5, check. I play king h8 and bishop to h6. So now my rook's going to be out of squares, because if rook e8, there's bishop to f7, and my rook is out of squares. So king to g7 was a possibility here. Let's see. So e6 is a bad idea. Takes, and they're taking this. King to g7. Let's see. There's this move e5. I see. I think that is right. E5 was what I was thinking was White's idea in this position. I thought that this was their point. E5 and then takes, and queen takes e5. So if my king's on g7, maybe a little bit more, probably the same, honestly. Player to f6, and maybe they take this. So something like this could happen, e5, and then this is maybe just an interesting pawn sacrifice that they can play with. I think it is a very practical pawn sacrifice, freeing their position. So that was a good idea. My opponent plays this move, bishop to h6. And yes, in my very distressed state and very, unfocused state anyway about this. But yes, in my very distressed state, I'm just like, well, guess we lost that rook. Guess we should trade off for the more dangerous bishop at least, which is definitely the dark square bishop. So let's play queen a5. And you can see how quickly I played this move, which was just in a couple minutes, which is pretty much how long it took for me to process that my rook was trapped. I have a much better move than queen a5 and allowing this to happen, this loss of the exchange. My much better move is this move rook to g8. And rook to g8 is so much better because after takes, queen takes, first of all, light square bishop was good. Second of all, I'm attacking a2. If you protect it in any way, I play g5. This bishop is in hot, hot water and will die. So here, White would actually have to play bishop to e3 just to not lose it, and then I would just take a2 and be cruising. So in this position, apparently the best move is just back bishop to e3, now threatening to take g8, because so then you can defend a2 without losing your bishop here, and then like this rook moves, and like apparently this is equal or something. So they just played c5 really just for this check and freeing their bishop, which is a totally understandable sacrifice of a pawn. So that's what I should have done. Rook g8, much better move. I just play queen a5 and just let this go. And now my opponent is just up in exchange. I thought at least I would still hold. So it's like, okay, like I got a pawn and the dark square bishop for the rook. That could be good. But I got the stupidest pawn. That pawn was actually my friend. It was boxing in 3 points worth of material. Instead, that bishop is very, very free and very, very good. So you'll see here as my opponent quickly improves their pieces. Queen to e3, stepping off the back rank. I played king g7. I didn't want them sneaking in there. Rook to b4. And as now I play rook c8, rook to b1. They've now doubled on this file. I'm like, okay, well, I thought everything was quite solid here anyway. But this bishop can trade off for this bishop very easily and just put a lot of pressure on me. After this, then they can play like f4 with this protected and e5. So me being very concerned about f4 and e5, first I play bishop to d7, trying to like dodge these trades. It's just so hard to recommend a move for black because I have nothing to attack. I have no real ideas of my own. right? If this pawn were still on the board, then things would be easier to play because white's play would be limited, but like the rook is free, this bishop is free, and I can't like attack this or get anything going. So bishop d7, I'm trying to like free this rook somehow that I just brought to my only open file. My opponent now just takes this opportunity to play f4 as soon as my bishop, at their very first opportunity, as soon as I'm not hitting there. So here comes f4 and e5. I switch back to bishop c6. So now e5, at least I got some freedom here. But my opponent plays a very good move, bishop to b5, with the rook now defending this way, just proposing this trade, and still trying to play e5, which would really blow everything open, and like also around my king, and my pieces are just not equipped to deal with this. So me, very concerned about e5. I play e5 myself, just trying to fix that pawn there, stop this from coming up. But this is still not going to end well. So takes. I can't take with a d pawn. My knight is hanging, so I play f takes, and they're trading on c6. Rook takes c6. Apparently, my life would have been easier with pawn takes c6, so my knight wouldn't have to defend this. But I didn't want to open this file completely, and I still had dreams of like using this file. I thought maybe there were still some weaknesses here, like there was before they had sacrificed this pawn. But the c5 pawn sacrifice, I mean, really changed the whole game. And my pawn continued to play well here. Queen to g5. So now they're threatening queen to e7. We got to stop that. Finally, my queen jumps into the game, but rook to f1. So my opponent got a serious achievement with this f4. So also they trade off light square bishop. It's a great trade for them. Rook to f1. They opened this up. Now they're looking at queen to f6. I have a lot of things to protect against. So here, queen to f6, not really protectable. Knight to d7 would allow an even worse check. So queen f6 is coming, and it looks like it's going to checkmate me. Big problems here. Big problems. So my only solution really is to just kind of go for it. Play knight d3, attack this, and maybe if I get a chance, then I can clog it with knight f4. Because like how I can't guard against this idea, like this would be the one thing that does without giving up an even like worse check here, and like everything comes down. So I need to try for something. So I try with for knight d3. The point being that I will play not king g8 and get mated in one move, but king to h6 and try and hang on for a moment. But my opponent finds a very nice idea here, which is queen to f8. Never mind the accuracy. I think this is the most human way to play. So my king cannot really step out even further. I play this move, queen to g7. I think if I step out even further, I get checkmated very quickly. With these ideas of like h4 and just like check, check, and okay, taking my knight at minimum, right? And otherwise, yeah. So taking my knight at minimum is their idea. So if king to h5, for example, they would just take my knight. So in the game, I play this move queen g7. At least, okay, maybe we'll trade, and this is still quite lost, but maybe I can take some things and try to attack some pawns, maybe. But my opponent plays very, very precise. This move queen to f3. So after putting my queen on g7 here, they come back queen f3, so blocking my escape route. If I take this rook, I believe their mating sequence is with queen to h3 here, so I no longer have king g7, and I think rook f or queen e3 first, yeah. King h5, g4. Yes, I remember calculating this in the game and concluding it's definitely checkmate. Like it's definitely just force mate. And I think this is the idea here. So queen to e3, yeah, keeps my escapes all blocked, keeps drawing my king forward. They guard that, so my king couldn't go backwards. Yeah, king h4, rook f3. Now with the idea of check and mate. So with the pawn controlling that. So yeah, my opponent correctly calculates that all. So queen to f3, a really, really nice move, and diffuses anything I was trying to do on the other side of the board. So I have to play here knight to f4 to take away this check. I'm at least able to kind of get things in order a little bit without getting mated so quickly. Queen e3 check, I play this move g5, but my opponent still achieves quite nice gains out of all that because they are at minimum able to take that pawn, and my king is still quite the mess, even if I'm not getting made immediately. But I'm here just down a full exchange, and my king is quite open. So here comes rook a8. All these pieces are trying to feast around my king. I try to get things back in order a little bit. I'm kind of controlling all these squares, so I'm not getting mated immediately, but my position still really sucks. And as you can see, I only have like a minute on the clock. Rook to b8 puts pressure here. I try to kind of protect that without, losing to some knockout blow like takes and check, right? And then take the knight, and then the other rook invades. I mean, it's not a good situation. I don't have any hits on their king. So here comes a4 now, just trying to play like a5, just trying to get in rook takes b7 tactics with, so like, for example, if my rook goes away, takes and check, And well, it's possible this doesn't work if takes e4 is on the table, right? Let me see here. Yeah, h4 is probably the best way to play, or queen to f5 first, right? Queen to f5 first. So in the game here, I play. Oh, I did play rook a6 anyway. I think yeah. So I'm daring my opponent to do this, I guess. Realizing that maybe here I have a prayer. If you can't checkmate me, um, if I can give infinite checks, right? So my opponent does not do that though, and shifts from just the f file and finds a new idea, queen to d3, heading that way. So now if I play this move, rook takes a4. Yeah, so for example, something just like queen d5 or queen b5 is a very, very nice way probably to finish the game. Targets this as well. Knight to c5, rook can come to e8. Everybody's feasting down here. Yeah, and as soon as the knight leaves c5, I think the big issue is this. I think the big issue can be these invasions, or maybe first this, and then some invasion like this. Let's see here. Is this idea check and check and check and winning the queen, something like this. It's kind of funny. Yeah, I mean, it was just a really, really rough position, kind of psychologically. I don't think I don't know. I was trying to make it as difficult as I could on my opponent, but my opponent, I think, had some very good ideas. So here, queen c7 was played, rook to e8. So I mean, I'm trying to hit the queen. My knight, I felt, was guarding a very important f8 square, but there's really nothing I can do here. All of a sudden, I realized I was quite lost with my knight under attack. I don't even have queen d7 defending this knight because of this nice move, queen to b5. Which is more than a queen trade, because now, like, if I dodge it, I lose this. My queen's under attack. If I take it, then one of these is lost, actually, unfortunately. And, you know, I can't even protect that without losing this. So I play here in this position. I have to play knight d8, and now after queen to f3, they're finally going to achieve infiltration on the f8 square or on the f6 square. And so here I resigned. And yeah, I mean, nice game by my opponent. I mean, things definitely I played quite well, and then as soon as I allowed this c5 move with bishop c4, you know, it's valuing activity over the pawns, and so it was a very good gambit. It was a very good sacrifice on their part. So okay, so here I'll show you the final standings of the tournament. So I had won round 8, which put me at 7 out of 8. I lost round 9, unfortunately. But at that point, I was only playing for rating and for maybe a better looking score. But I had achieved the I am norm that I had wanted to actually. Um, yeah, I was wondering if I could pull up a picture. Probably not. Maybe I'll edit one. I'll edit the picture here after the video. But yeah, thanks guys so much for watching this journey of mine. I think every time I can play maybe a 1 game a day tournament, then maybe I will have time to upload as I go, which is what I really love to do. But with 2 games a day, I think it's very difficult to make them in real time. So I'll probably have to do it afterwards. But I mean, I would love to do it in real time, and, you know, maybe make more content like this. But this was just something that you know, typically my stuff's all about gambits, but this was something that I certainly had to share with you guys, and I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll link all the games here. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm trying to be, of course, as educational as possible, tell you all about my prep, tell you all about my thought process and what it's like to be at a tournament like this. And yeah, it certainly won't be my last. And um, yeah, I'm really, really happy that I got the norm. I'm really happy that I got the norm. And so, you know, I need 2 more tournaments like that to attain the IM title. Uh, yeah, it's tough. I really did not see it coming. I was a COVID replacement late for someone. I only knew about a day before. So yeah, anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. And yeah, please like and subscribe for more content like this. And I will see you guys next time. Have a great day, Gambit Chads.